So I'd like to have each of you close your eyes for a moment, wherever you are. And we're just going to consider for a moment the newcomer students that you've mentioned. Those of you who haven't shared out loud, but in the chat, think of the newcomer, immigrant, and refugee students you know. And by newcomer, you can think, having arrived maybe in the last anywhere from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to up to 10 years to the United States. If you don't work with newcomers, maybe those that you've heard about in other settings, and consider the conditions that force their families to flee. And in order to flee and risk their lives, whether they came to the US by boat, by plane, by foot, on a train. And now I want all of you to imagine that it's you who's been forced to flee violence or abuse or threats on your life or desperate poverty. You may have been separated from your family. You don't know if you can stay in the place that you found temporary refuge. You don't have any access to income, housing, or formal employment at first. And especially thinking about young migrants, you may not be allowed to go to school, or you may be allowed to go to school, but with your family's needs, you might come sporadically as you need to earn income however possible. You might work in the back of a restaurant, you might clean homes or offices, you might work as a day laborer in construction jobs or gardening. When you do come to school, it's in a language you've never heard or learned before, perhaps, and everything is new. The school building, the way of teaching, the tests that teachers are anxious about preparing you for, the other students from different places who you go to school with. The trauma that you've experienced may make it hard to focus at school. You might have nightmares at night. You might not get enough food to eat sometimes or enough sleep. Yet you know that your family is counting on you to use your educational opportunities to help them overcome their difficult circumstances, which also makes you feel stressed out. So with these images and some of these realities of newcomer students in mind, you can open your eyes. And now I'd like you to put yourself back in your own shoes as educators of newcomer, immigrant, and refugee students, which is most of you who are with us here in the workshop tonight. You're faced with students who have a tremendous amount of needs: academic, socio-emotional, material, legal, and more. And often our teacher education programs, even our in-service trainings, don't offer us much by way of how to work with newcomer, immigrant, and refugee students, most of them who are English language learners and are often, in increasing numbers in our schools and classrooms and communities. So globally, 281 million people have migrated from their country of birth worldwide. That's a huge number. And that's there's many more people who migrate within their national context, and that's not even including them. This is people who've gone from one country to another. In the United States, if we zoom in here, immigrants and refugees comprise 14.4% of the population, according to the 2020 census. Which is a high number and often feeds a lot of rhetoric about immigration. We might see it in the media, in debates and politics, et cetera. But when we look at the history of the United States, it's actually not the highest proportion of foreign-born individuals. If we think about the 1800s, the highest number so far that's been recorded was in 1890. The number of foreign-born individuals in the entire US population was actually 14.8%. And this was when immigration was pretty much open, at least to European countries, for people to come without much need for visas or applications or et cetera, if one was coming from Europe. If we look at states like California and New York, 30% of the population is foreign born. And when we look at our schooling systems, 1 out of 4 people in the United States, or 1 out of 4 people in US schools is either an immigrant or the child of immigrants. And it is mirrored in the larger population. It's about 1 out of 4 as well. But when we look at the schooling population, that's what this statistic is. And then when we look at the success of individuals who are English language learners, many, but not all of whom are newcomer, immigrant, and refugee students, just 60% graduate high school nationally as compared to 85%, which is the national average. So a much lower rate of completion when we look at that. Leslie and we have separately been doing work and research in schools that serve newcomer students in New York and the Bay Area over the past 2 decades to better understand and serve this population. I worked for a few years at a high school for newly arrived students in the Bronx, And they defined newcomers as those who had arrived in the past 4 years in the Bronx, New York. And then I've later, as a professor, I've carried out research in the San Francisco Bay Area with newcomer students in a few different school settings. Leslie co-wrote a widely acclaimed book about a school for newcomer Latinx students in New York. And the book is called Additive Schooling in Subtractive Times, Bilingual Education and Dominican Immigrant Youth in the Heights. Check it out if you haven't already. And she's done research with immigrant and refugee students in Brooklyn and elsewhere. The impetus for this new book that we're sharing about with you today came from a need identified by a group of us, including our other 2 primary co-authors, one of whom is Danny Walsh, who's a longtime teacher and school leader. He's served as a principal of a newcomer high school in New York City. And our other primary author, who's a former newcomer student herself, Gabby Martinez, who came to the US from El Salvador at age 16. And we also have 18 other contributors to this volume who are former students, educators, administrators, and researchers. We also have profiles of people who are not in high school anymore, but are reflecting on their time coming to the US for high school, who are newcomer students at the high school level, and now are in their mid-20s, early 30s, and who are reflecting back on what worked and didn't work and sharing advice to educators. And so these narratives are also peppered that we'll talk about throughout the book. And they're from Myanmar, Afghanistan, Togo, West Africa, El Salvador, and Mexico, the profiles. So our impetus in doing this book was feeling that academic research is often only read by academics and is behind steep paywalls. And sometimes on the other end, practitioner books may be very specific to a particular place or site or particular type of school. And so what we wanted to do in this book was create a resource that includes strategies that are rooted in research, as well as the voices of former newcomer students themselves about the challenges that faced and what worked for them in the schools that they landed up in. Profiles, we have 4 profiles of schools that we think are doing a good job with integrating and serving newcomer students. And then we have an exhaustive list of resources for educators to sort of have like a one-stop shop for resources and working with newcomer English language learners in grades 6 to 12, which is targeted for this book. So this is the book, Humanizing Education for Immigrant and Refugee Youth, 20 Strategies for the Classroom and Beyond. And as we mentioned earlier, it has former student and school profiles of schools that are we think serving immigrant and refugee students well, and that some of our members of our collaborative that wrote the book have done research in. We have a couple of chapters that give an overview of some of the research that talks about the dimensions of success for immigrant and refugee students, different research on language and different language approaches, on some of the ways to affirm students' backgrounds and cultures, how to make school more welcoming for families, et cetera. There's some of that in the beginning chapters. And then we jump into the strategies, which are divided up into 3 different categories. The first category really zooms in on the classroom. So it's the real kind of micro level of the classroom where most of the interaction with newcomer students takes place. Their classroom is really their second home, and thinking about instructional design there. So we have a chapter on translanguaging, which is using the home language in ways that acknowledges it as an asset rather than a liability in the acquisition of English and the learning. Curricular relevance, using grouping in different ways that's purposeful. We have a chapter on differentiated instruction and universal design for learning. There's a chapter that squarely focuses in on what came up on the Jamboard of students who have severely limited and interrupted formal education. The acronym that some folks use is SLIFE, for students who've had long gaps in their education and then are coming, say, into 9th grade, not literate in their home language. So the chapter focuses on some instructional strategies with groups of students like that. We have a chapter on holistic assessment, kind of going beyond the standardized tests to really think about what does it mean to show mastery of content knowledge in ways that are more expansive. We have a chapter on advisory periods and how those have worked well for newcomer students. And then we move into category 2, which is looking at sort of school-wide approaches that can really benefit newcomer students. There's a chapter on democratic school governance, intentional staffing that came up in the Jamboard that we just looked at, having teaching assistants who speak languages of student groups. So thinking about where that staffing can really help reach newcomer students and their families. There's a chapter on coaching. So we often think about coaching in general for teachers, but this is focused on coaching for educators and school leaders that serve newcomers and how that can really benefit these populations. School-wide language policies. We have a chapter on school climate and culture, kind of the ethos of the environment, being welcoming for newcomers. A chapter on health and wellness approaches, a chapter on dual enrollment and early college. And then we move into category 3, which are strategies for extracurricular programs and community partnerships, a chapter on after school and summer programming, family engagement approaches, legal services, and this is particularly for students who may be undocumented, who may be unaccompanied minors, who have migrated without their families. Often their legal needs can consume a lot of their time and pull them out of school for long chunks of time. And so how have different schools, some of the ideas that come up in that chapter are related to partnering with community agencies that can come to campus and give workshops. There's also a lot of kind of predatory people and organizations that try to extract money from groups that are undocumented and trick them. So talking about school as a place where you can provide trusted and verified information to families and students who might be looking to access legal services that aren't trying to take advantage of their precarious situation. And again, in community partnerships, it's talking about not just legal services, but community partnerships for a whole host of other ways that social service agencies, nonprofits can work with schools to provide resources and services for students and families. A chapter on internships and career preparation. And then finally, the 20th chapter is on alumni engagement and how to really engage those folks who've been newcomers themselves, who have successfully, finished secondary, high school, and then using them as resources in ways such as tutoring or staffing, as mentors, role models, buddies, translators, et cetera, in the life of a school to really keep those alumni engaged. So we also, as I mentioned earlier, highlight several schools throughout the book, but 4 schools in particular that come up in these school profiles that are peppered throughout the book as well. So before we open to more questions and answers and discussion, we wanted to show you 2 schools that are featured in the book and just kind of take us inside the life a little bit. So we're going to show you 2 really short videos. They're each only 2 to 3 minutes. One is of Brooklyn International High School in New York. And the second one is of Oakland International High School in California. And in the Oakland International High School video, keep an eye out for our co-author, Gabby Martinez, who used to work at the school. She's got a little cameo in that video. So we'll show those videos and then we'll open up for questions and engagement with you all. If there's things we haven't covered or things you want to know more about, we're happy to engage for the remaining time that we have. So let me see if I can share these videos. Okay. Here we go. Okay, so I want to share screen. And what we'll also do is throw in the chat a link to the companion website for the book, which is where we have a video playlist and lots of further resources as well. So share sound, share video. Here we go. And let me know if you can't hear or anything.
My first memory of arriving to New York is getting off at JFK and looking out to see a world that I've never seen before. Being in a place where you don't speak the language could be frustrating. Before I arrived to the US, I didn't speak any English, so I had to learn English from the beginning. So I attended Brooklyn International High School, which is an international school set up for recent immigrants to New York, and it was a place that a lot of us considered home.
I learned to be open-minded, I learned about tolerance, and I learned about the beauty of having such diverse students in a classroom sitting and talking together and forgetting our differences and look at the commonality.
As a teacher, there are many times I feel like this is why we do this. If I see students going in my class and just understanding what they're doing and talking about the math that we're doing, it's like, great, you got it. Like when I see those aha moments, that makes me very happy. The International Network for Public Schools is an organization that helps international high schools succeed by providing them with the professional development that they need, with the support that they need.
My experience at the internationals as a student did not only provide me with knowledge necessary for my success in college, but it provided me the skills and the flexibility to become an independent thinker and to be aware that yes, I am going to face obstacles and barriers, but I am the captain of my ship. I can make it.
Okay, and here is video 2.
Oakland International High School serves newly arrived immigrants and refugees. We are part of Oakland Unified School District, and we welcome students from 30 countries on average, speaking a couple of dozen languages. And we focus on English language acquisition and helping them acculturate to a new country.
As a community school, we're working with resources throughout the community, throughout Oakland, throughout Alameda County, in some cases throughout California, to provide services and support here on campus to both connect our students to that wider community and also to forge and build this beautiful community here on campus, and to really create a community system that feels like a family.
For me, this school was like my second home, and it felt like a place where I could always come back. Now I'm glad that I'm back to work for this school and this community.
It's critical that our school be serving not just the needs inside the classroom, but also the wraparound needs outside of the classroom. To do this, we rely on strategic partnerships with community organizations that have expertise in particular areas. We also rely on our partnership with Soccer Without Borders to provide free sports activities for our students, and they also provide health and wellness activities.
Being a program partner at Oakland International, I think, supports the students and families in a number of ways. First, we provide programming outside of school time. So during after school, we run a soccer and educational programming that supports the students after the school day is finished. And we also have a lot of weekend programming. So that keeps the students engaged in positive activities where they're continuing to develop their English skills, building positive relationships across cultures.
I think this school, for me, is the best one that I ever went. And when I come here, like, I feel safety, and I feel like this is my home, because when the first day I came here, all the teachers want to help me, and I make new friends, and we are like a family here.
The difference between this school and a lot of other schools is that we really consider ourselves to be something like a family.
It's on loop, starting again. Okay, so that just to give you a little glimpse into some of the schools that we profile in the book and some of the students. Obviously, you work with similar students, so you all know. And then you have the link to that companion site that has a lot of additional resources that we have compiled as well.